the Calvinist Standard Version, or the ESV as it's more popularly known, this time on the Casual Theologian. All right, today we're going to be talking about the ESV, the English Standard Version. This is part, I don't even know, of the translation series. In a spirit of full disclosure, I had recorded this video a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. I don't even know anymore. And I recorded the whole thing, and the top of my head was cut off. Not literally, I'm talking about the camera. And because of that, I canned the whole thing. I threw it all out the garbage, and I'm reshooting it. Also, it was just some hot garbage. So we're going to try again, and we're going to talk about the ESV. This is the Casual Theologian, where, I just try to encourage others to be Bible learners and to read their Bibles and to learn about the Bible and everything that you need to know about Jesus and his word and about God, all of it. Jesus and God are the same thing, but I just needed to cover all the bases. Today, we're talking about the ESV. I already said that like 3 times. Let's get into it. The ESV was originally started in 1997. It started being written in 1997, and it was published in 2001 by Crossway. And at the time, it was based on the most up-to-date manuscripts in the Greek and the Hebrew. And since it was published in 2001, that's fairly recent for a Bible translation, so we can be fairly confident in those Hebrew and Greek translations. The goal with the translation was to be maximally transparent, as Dane Ortlund put it, and he was a member of the translation committee, and he's also author of the very popular book, Gentle and Lowly. Great book, highly recommend it. But that was what his goal was in the translation process personally, and I'm sure that was the whole goal throughout the entire thing, was to be maximally transparent. What does maximally transparent mean? It just means to be as word for word as possible while also maintaining some readability. That's how they want to be, as maximally transparent, but maximally while being readable. The translators obtained the right to the RSV, Revised Standard Version, and they used that as their base text. And the idea was that they loved the RSV, but they knew it needed updating in multiple areas, so they obtained the rights to the RSV and started making the ESV. And as I hinted to in just a couple seconds ago, the translation methodology, let's talk about that right now. The translation methodology was maximally transparent, or to put it in more simple terms, in terms we've already used in this series, it tries to be a word-for-word translation. However, it's not as word-for-word as the NASB. A lot of people love this translation, and for good reason. It's praised for being readable, while also, obviously, like I have already said, being word-for-word. And I like that. The circle I'm in, like people who really like studying the word, like every Christian should, you should like a word for word, at least in some aspect, because it can help you really get into the meat and potatoes, some of that in detail, word for word Bible translation study, trying to get into the deep nuances of things. The ESV, much like the CSB, tries to be as gender accurate as possible. So for instance, gender accurate would be like the CSB, like we covered earlier, trying to make sure you know when a verse is talking about men and women together and just stating that outright, versus how the Bible originally kind of put it, is just like when it refers to both men and women, it would just say men. To be more clear, a lot of times they'll say men and women, or guys and girls, or whatever it is, right? They're trying to be as gender accurate as possible and convey that in the text, whereas a text like the NRSV is super loose with its translation methodology when it comes to gender, and tries to just include men and women in multiple different areas where that shouldn't be, when it talks about eldership and stuff like that. Verses like John chapter 7, verses 53 through John chapter 8, verse 11, and Mark chapter 16, verses 9 through 20 are bracketed, and it's super obvious and very clear with the fact that they weren't in the original or at least the earliest that we have right now, manuscripts of the Bible. Some fun facts or some interesting tidbits for you. John Piper, the famous author and preacher, was kind of one of the main catalysts behind the ESV. He actually called, I believe it was J.I. Packer, don't quote me on that, and told him like, hey, we like the RSV, let's update it and make it better, and kind of got the ball rolling on that. So I think that's really cool. As I kind of jested at the very beginning of this video, a lot of people call this a Calvinist translation. Most likely because people like Wayne Grudem and J.I. Packer, who are famous Calvinists, were deeply a part of making the ESV. Also, if you get something like the ESV Study Bible or the Reformation Study Bible, which comes in the ESV, I don't think it comes in any other translations. Verses like John 15:16, Ephesians chapter 1, verses 4 through 5, and Acts 13:48, and John 6:44 all seem to interpret those, like the study section, like the bottom footnote part. They seem to kind of interpret those in a Calvinistic way, which if you're me or Jill, my wife, I don't see any other way you could interpret it though any other way outside of the Calvinistic perspective, but that's for a different video. But because of that, the ESV a lot of times gets accredited to Calvinistic beliefs, and it's often called a Calvinist translation, which obviously I'm not helping that because I consider myself a Calvinist and I love the ESV. Also, another fun fact is if you go to the ESV website, esv.org, they offer an interlinear version of both the Greek and the Hebrew for free, which I think is like super cool. And also, you can have it read to you by Kristen Getty, who is a famous worshiper, like singer lady, worship leader, and she also has an Irish accent. It's really awesome and fun. 10 out of 10 recommend. Personally, I really, really like this translation. I know when I started this series, what feels like a year ago, definitely not that long ago, but it feels like it. My top 3 translations were the NASB, the CSB, and the NKJV. However, I think the ESV has eclipsed the NKJV in my top 3. I definitely think the ESV has its firm place in my top 3 now. So that just gives you an idea of how much I like it. Also, another thing to think about, just to vouch for how much I like the ESV translation, Jill and I have 3 Bibles that are ESV in our house alone. It definitely takes the number 1 spot in the most consistent translation in our house. We have 3 of them, I think. So I love the ESV. So what is my verdict? Like I just said, the ESV is awesome. It is great. It really does a good job at being maximally transparent, like Dane Ortland put it, clear with the gender pronouns, which I can't, that sounds super woke, but you know what I mean. And just really, really edifying to read. In fact, one of the translators in the translation committee said that they purposefully translated it in a way to where it's not deceptive by any means, but where some verses are going to be harder to understand than others, and you're going to have to actually study it to understand what the original intention of one verse over another verse, or not one verse over another verse, but just like one verse and other verses, what they mean. You actually have to study to really understand it because of the word for word nature of the ESV, which I think is awesome. Anything that encourages Christians to study their Bible, that's going to get an A+ for me. So yes, ESV, great. If you don't have an ESV, I highly recommend, because yes, ESV, just so good. My church, the ESV is predominantly the translation that everyone uses. I think it's just a universally respected translation. Even if you're not a Calvinist, I think it's a great translation. So definitely check it out. With that, we'll wrap up this video. If you're listening on podcast, check it out on YouTube at The Casual Theologian. You can just look up The Casual Theologian on YouTube and you'll find me, hopefully. And if you're on YouTube, check out my podcast. at the Casual Theologian. I'm also on Instagram, so check that out. And yeah, I think that might be it. Next video, we're going to be covering, because I've made you guys wait so long, the NIV and the NLT together in one whopping marathon of a video. So buckle your seatbelts, strap in, and get your brains ready, because it's about to be a bumpy ride. See you later.